now joined by Daniel Alvarenga. He's a Salvadorian journalist. And, I was surprised to hear about the level of gang violence and how suffocating it was for the people there. And in some ways, it's impressive, the speed that this has all changed, but also concerning as well. As you can imagine, there are unintended consequences. What is the reaction there on the ground from your folks you speak with?
Well, there is a lot of relief. A lot of people are glad that, they can go outside and they can, feel a little bit more safe in the streets. But, El Salvador has had a very, very difficult history from the Civil War to the gang period now. And we've had these waves of violence go up and down. So, it's been a year of the state of exception. It hasn't lifted, but we've been here before. We've had these mano dura or hard on crime policies in the past, where the murder rate goes down for a bit, then comes back up. And so it's very speculative to see what the long-term effects are going to be, what he's going to do with the 65,000 imprisoned people. For the first time in history, El Salvador has outranked the United States for incarcerated people per capita. So that is a big concern still today, and human rights organizations like the Human Rights Watch have been sounding the alarm on human rights abuses in El Salvador.
I'm just curious, what is the core issue, root cause of all of this gang violence? In the U.S. we have our reasons, and in different parts of the world there are different reasons, but oftentimes it's about economic opportunities, and for young people, if they don't feel like there are opportunities ahead of them, they turn to, unfortunately, gang violence. And I don't know if that plays a role in it or if there's something else.
Yes, absolutely. The lack of social services, the lack of investment in youth, and their opportunities. The gangs actually started in Los Angeles. They're a product from the U.S. They came in the 90s following President Clinton's mass deportation laws during that period. And so they're an imported problem. El Salvador was war-torn from the 1980s war. They signed a peace accord in 1992. So then you had an influx of deportees who had, learned sort of the gang and criminal life out in the United States. And so this country was not, able to take these people in and provide them social services, provide them therapy for their war trauma, or provide them, jobs or education. And so, we've seen this problem since the 90s. El Salvador has been going through this for decades. And so understandably, people are tired. They're very tired of this violence in their society, but it's coming at a huge cost to people's everyday freedoms. People in working class neighborhoods could be arbitrarily detained, stopped, imprisoned. They get no trial. And the conditions in the jails and the prisons have been reported to be very bad.
Has there been some discussion as to when the state of the emergency and how long will it last for?
We're unsure. We thought it would only last a month, and then there was an extension. We thought it would only last 3 more months, and now we're a full year under it, and there's no sign there's been no sign to show us that it's going to be lifted anytime soon. But when it does, we can predict that maybe the homicide rate will go back up, because El Salvador has gone through these waves of violence, and then there's packed with gangs, there's things, and then it comes back.
Daniel, the IMF talked about this particular issue, saying that has warned the country about sort of the Bitcoin issue, and El Salvador has embraced Bitcoin. And Bitcoin doesn't have a great reputation when it comes to doing sort of honest businesses, but I'll leave that for another time. Tell us some positives that might be coming out of the recent crackdown and sort of the cleaning up of the streets, if you will.
It's hard. It's very speculative to see. With the Bitcoin thing has been popular with the government, but it hasn't really been popular with the people. El Salvador still uses the U.S. dollar. Bitcoin has sort of become this novelty and to attract sort of foreign investment. But, El Salvador lost 60 million in its first year of Bitcoin, and, spent 375 million as well. So, El Salvador still has been recovering from the pandemic, and also the United States is its largest trading partner. So the recession in the United States is going to affect El Salvador. So the narrative that is on the ground is a little different from the narrative that the government is pushing. The government isn't being very transparent with where this money for the crypto is coming from. Are they using public funds? Are they using their own money? And so people don't really use Bitcoin. If you go to the street, like no one's really using Bitcoin. The people who are using Bitcoin are foreigners who come because of the novelty. They go to the chain stores like Starbucks, McDonald's, and that's where they'll get Bitcoin. And some of the resorts have Bitcoin, but the everyday Salvadoran hasn't really seen the benefits of Bitcoin yet.
Do we know, Daniel, what the outlook is for the next, say, 6 to 12 months for the country that's coming out of, I guess, some of this violent past, but hopefully something more stable?
Well, El Salvador is gearing up for a presidential election in early 2024. And it's a bit controversial, even though President Nayib Bukele has a really high approval rating, is very popular with the people. It is against El Salvador's constitution to have a consecutive run for president. He has already announced that he would run for re-election. So El Salvador's democracy dates back to 1992 from the peace accords. So this is unprecedented. We've never seen this before. And El Salvador has a long history of military dictatorships. So his presidency, whether he decides to run again or not, which he says he has, whether he goes through with it, and how the international community responds will be very interesting, because he's violating the Constitution, even though he has control of all branches of the government. So he could really kind of do what he wants, and he's kind of running unopposed. There hasn't been any sort of candidate. So if that were to happen, 5 more years of Bukele, and for fans of Bukele who are a fan of his state of exception and a fan of his Bitcoin policies, that's favorable for them.
Right.
But it could really undo years of democracy.
Daniel, we'll expect some updates from you in the coming months. Really appreciate the update on what's happening there on the ground. Very candid and very clear. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.